I was adjusting my black cocktail dress in the bathroom mirror of the Marriott downtown, preparing for what I thought would be a celebration of another successful year at Sterling Financial Services. As senior portfolio manager, I just closed the biggest quarter in our division's history, bringing in $12 million in new client assets. The end-of-year dinner was supposed to be my moment of recognition. Instead, it became the night my career was destroyed by the woman I'd spent 3 months training to be my equal. I'd been with Sterling for 8 years, working my way up from junior analyst to one of the company's top performers. When our division expanded and management decided to hire another senior manager, I was thrilled. More leadership meant less pressure on me, and I genuinely looked forward to having a peer who could share the workload. That peer was Amanda Chen, Harvard MBA, impeccable credentials, and a smile that seemed genuine when she introduced herself on her first day 3 months earlier. "Sarah, I'm so grateful for this opportunity," Amanda had said, shaking my hand with what I thought was sincere enthusiasm. "I've heard incredible things about your work here, and I'm really looking forward to learning from you." I believed her. More than that, I wanted to help her succeed. For 3 months, I shared everything: client relationships I'd cultivated over years, investment strategies that had made the firm millions, internal processes that took me years to perfect. I introduced Amanda to my biggest clients, included her in strategy meetings, and even let her shadow me during crucial negotiations. "You're such an amazing mentor," Amanda would tell me regularly. "I hope I can contribute even half as much as you do." I was proud of how quickly she adapted. Amanda seemed to absorb everything I taught her, ask insightful questions, and demonstrate the kind of analytical skills that made me confident she'd be a valuable partner. What I didn't realize was that she was studying me like a predator studies prey, learning not just my professional methods but my weaknesses, my relationships, and the exact knowledge she'd need to replace me entirely. The end-of-year dinner was held in the Marriott's Grand Ballroom, with over 200 employees, clients, and board members in attendance. I sat at the head table, wearing the black cocktail dress I'd bought specifically for this night, when I expected to be recognized for my record-breaking performance. Richard Sterling, our CEO, stood to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an exceptional year for Sterling Financial Services. Our portfolio management division has exceeded all expectations, bringing in over $40 million in new assets." I smiled, knowing that nearly 30% of those assets had come from my direct efforts. This was going to be my moment. "Tonight, I want to recognize the outstanding leadership that has driven this success," Richard continued. "As many of you know, we recently restructured our portfolio management division to position ourselves for even greater growth in the coming year." My stomach began to tighten. Something about Richard's tone felt off. "It's my pleasure to announce that Amanda Chen has been promoted to Managing Director of Portfolio Services, effective immediately." The applause was thunderous, but I felt like I was drowning. Managing Director? That was the position above mine, the role I'd been working toward for years. Amanda stood gracefully, her smile radiant as she acknowledged the applause. She looked directly at me for just a moment, and I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. Not gratitude or surprise, but calculated satisfaction. "Thank you, Richard," Amanda said as she took the microphone. "I'm honored by this promotion and excited about the opportunities ahead. As my first act as managing director, I'll be implementing some organizational changes to streamline our operations and eliminate redundancies." Eliminate redundancies. The corporate euphemism hit me like a physical blow. Effective Monday morning, we'll be restructuring several positions to align with our new strategic direction. This includes the elimination of the senior portfolio manager role currently held by Sarah Matthews. The room went silent. 200 people watched as I realized that the woman I'd trained for 3 months had just fired me in front of our entire company, our clients, and the board of directors. "Sarah's contributions to the firm have been valued," Amanda continued with practiced corporate sympathy, "and we wish her well in her future endeavors. HR will be in touch about transition arrangements." I sat frozen, feeling the eyes of every person in that ballroom on me. Colleagues I'd worked with for years looked away in embarrassment. Clients I'd brought to the firm seemed confused about why their primary contact was being eliminated. Board members who had praised my performance just months earlier now watched my public humiliation with detached curiosity. Amanda continued her speech about exciting new directions and optimized efficiency, but I couldn't process the words. I was too focused on the magnitude of what had just happened. 3 months ago, Amanda Chen had walked into my office as a new hire who needed my guidance. Tonight, she'd promoted herself to my superior and fired me in the most humiliating way possible, in front of everyone who mattered in my professional world. The worst part wasn't just the firing or even the public humiliation. It was the realization that every moment of our 3-month working relationship had been a lie. Every time Amanda had thanked me for my mentorship, every question she'd asked about my methods, every client introduction I'd facilitated, all of it had been part of a calculated plan to learn everything she needed to eliminate me. As Amanda finished her speech and the crowd returned to their conversations, I sat at the head table feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Richard Sterling approached me with the awkward expression of a CEO who just allowed one of his top performers to be publicly executed. "Sarah, I'm sorry about the timing," he said quietly. "Amanda felt it was important to announce the restructuring tonight to maintain momentum. Richard, I brought in $12 million this quarter alone. My clients specifically work with Sterling because of their relationship with me. I understand your concerns, but Amanda has presented some compelling strategies for growth. The board felt her vision aligned better with our long-term objectives." I realized that Richard wasn't apologizing for the decision. He was apologizing for the timing. Amanda hadn't just convinced him to fire me. She'd convinced him that firing me publicly was somehow the right approach. What about my clients? What about the relationships I've built over 8 years? Richard's expression grew uncomfortable. Amanda will be transitioning those relationships over the next few weeks. She's already begun building rapport with many of your key accounts. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Amanda learned my methods during our 3 months together, but she'd been secretly cultivating relationships with my clients, preparing to take over my entire professional life. As I gathered my purse and prepared to leave the dinner that was supposed to celebrate my success, Amanda approached me with the same smile she'd worn during our first meeting. "Sarah, I hope you understand that this is just business. You taught me so much, and I really am grateful for everything you shared with me." I looked at her. This woman who had systematically studied and dismantled my career while pretending to be my mentee, and felt a cold rage settling in my chest. "Amanda, you have no idea what you've just done. I've made a difficult business decision for the good of the company. I hope you can see it that way eventually." As I walked out of the Marriott that night, past colleagues who couldn't meet my eyes and clients who looked confused about my sudden departure, I realized that Amanda Chen had made one crucial mistake in her otherwise flawless execution. She assumed that after 8 years at Sterling Financial Services, all of my value to the company existed in the knowledge and relationships she'd spent 3 months systematically stealing from me. She was wrong, and she was about to discover just how wrong she was. I spent the weekend after my public humiliation in a haze of disbelief and rage, replaying every interaction I'd had with Amanda over the past 3 months. Every question she'd asked, every meeting she'd observed, every client she'd met, all of it had been part of a systematic plan to steal my career while pretending to learn from me. But by Monday morning, the shock had crystallized into something much more dangerous: cold, analytical fury. I was reviewing my employment contract and non-compete agreements when my phone rang with a call from Jennifer Walsh, my former assistant, and one of the few people at Sterling who had genuinely seemed upset about my firing. "Sarah, I need to see you. There are things about Amanda that you need to know." We met at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from Sterling's offices to avoid any accidental encounters with my former colleagues. Jennifer looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder as if she expected Amanda to materialize at any moment. "Jennifer, what's going on?" "Sarah, Amanda didn't just plan to fire you, she's been planning it since before she was even hired." I felt my blood pressure spike. "What do you mean?" "I've been doing some digging since Friday night because what happened to you was so obviously wrong. Amanda didn't randomly apply for a position at Sterling. She specifically targeted our company, and she specifically targeted your job." Jennifer pulled out her laptop and showed me a series of screenshots she'd compiled. "Look at this. 3 months before Amanda was hired, she was researching Sterling Financial online, focusing specifically on our portfolio management division. The screenshots showed Amanda's LinkedIn activity, professional forum posts, and even social media check-ins that painted a picture of calculated career stalking. She attended industry events where she knew Sterling executives would be present. She connected with people in our HR department, and she even joined the same gym as Richard Sterling." I stared at the evidence Jennifer had compiled, feeling sick as I realized the depth of Amanda's premeditation. "You're saying she orchestrated her own hiring specifically to target my position? It gets worse." I found emails in the general administrative folder, ones that Amanda thought were deleted but that get automatically archived by our IT system. Jennifer showed me printed emails between Amanda and someone named David Liu, who appeared to be a career consultant or executive coach. "Read this one from 2 weeks after she started," Jennifer said, pointing to a specific email. The message was damning. "Phase 1 complete. Sarah is completely trusting and has shared all client contact information and internal processes. She has no idea I'm documenting everything for transition purposes. Estimating 6 to 8 weeks to complete knowledge transfer, then we move to phase 2. I felt like I was going to vomit. Phase 2? That's where it gets really sick. Look at this email from 6 weeks ago. The next message was even more devastating. Sarah continues to be the perfect mentor, introducing me to all her major clients and sharing proprietary investment strategies. She actually thinks we're going to be partners. Beginning relationship cultivation with key accounts to prepare for her elimination. Target date for restructuring announcement. End-of-year dinner for maximum impact. The calculated cruelty of Amanda's plan was breathtaking. She hadn't just stolen my job. She'd planned my public humiliation as the climax of a 3-month psychological manipulation campaign. Jennifer, how did you find these emails? I've been helping with the transition documentation that Amanda requested after the dinner. She asked for access to all your client files, communication logs, even your personal calendars and meeting notes from the past year. Why would she need my personal calendars? That's what made me suspicious. I started looking through the files more carefully, and I realized Amanda was building a complete profile of your professional life, not to learn from it, but to replace it entirely. Jennifer showed me more evidence of Amanda's systematic theft of my professional identity. She's been copying your client communication style, using phrases and strategies you taught her, even adopting your presentation format for client meetings. So she's literally impersonating me professionally? It's worse than that. I found drafts of emails Amanda prepared to send to your clients, explaining that you'd decided to pursue other opportunities and that she would be their new primary contact, ensuring seamless continuity of service. I read the draft emails with growing horror. Amanda had crafted messages that made my firing sound like a voluntary departure, while positioning herself as the natural successor to relationships I'd spent years building. Jennifer, this is corporate identity theft. She's stolen my methods, my clients, and even my professional reputation. There's something else, something that I think Amanda doesn't realize you know about. Jennifer opened a new folder on her laptop. Remember the Harrison Industries account? The $12 million client you brought in during your last quarter? Of course. That was the biggest deal of my career. Amanda's been telling people that she was the primary relationship manager on that account, that you were more of a supporting role in the client development process. I felt my hands clenching into fists. That's completely false. I spent 6 months cultivating that relationship. Amanda didn't even meet Harrison until after the deal was already structured. I know. I have your calendars and email records that prove you were the sole point of contact with Harrison Industries from initial outreach through contract signing. Jennifer showed me email threads, meeting schedules, and client notes that documented my exclusive management of the Harrison relationship. Amanda met them exactly twice, both times as part of client introduction meetings that you arranged. So she's not just stealing my job and my clients, she's rewriting history to claim credit for my biggest successes? Exactly. And Sarah, I think she's planning to do the same thing with your other major accounts. She's been scheduling transition meetings with clients, presenting herself as the architect of strategies you developed. The scope of Amanda's betrayal was staggering. She hadn't just eliminated me from Sterling Financial, she was systematically erasing my professional accomplishments and claiming them as her own. Jennifer, there's something I need to tell you. Something Amanda doesn't know. What? I thought about the conversation I'd had with Richard Sterling 6 months earlier, when he'd first mentioned the possibility of expanding our portfolio management team. I'd been excited about the prospect of having a partner, but I'd also been cautious about protecting the intellectual property and client relationships I'd developed over 8 years. 6 months ago, when Richard told me we might be hiring another senior manager, I took some precautions to protect my work. What kind of precautions? I documented all of my client development processes, investment strategies, and relationship management techniques. But more importantly, I filed intellectual property protection for several of the analytical tools and client assessment methods I'd developed. Jennifer's eyes widened. You mean Amanda can't legally use your methods? Not without licensing agreements that specify my ownership of the processes. She's been learning and copying proprietary business methods that are legally protected under intellectual property law. Does she know about the IP protection? I never mentioned it because I thought we were going to be partners. I was planning to share the licensing with her as part of our collaboration. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the contact information for Patricia Reeves, the intellectual property attorney who had helped me file the protection documents. Jennifer, Amanda thinks she stole my knowledge and methods. What she actually stole was legally protected intellectual property that she's now using without authorization. What does that mean? It means that every client meeting where she uses my assessment tools, every strategy presentation that incorporates my analytical methods, every piece of advice she gives based on processes I developed, all of it constitutes intellectual property theft. Jennifer looked amazed. So you can sue her? I can do more than sue her. I can demand that Sterling Financial cease using any of my proprietary methods immediately, which would effectively cripple Amanda's ability to manage my former clients. What about the clients themselves? I thought about the relationships I'd built over 8 years, the trust I'd established with people who valued my specific approach to portfolio management. That's the other thing Amanda doesn't understand. She learned my methods, but she doesn't understand why they work. What do you mean? My client relationships aren't just based on analytical tools or investment strategies. They're based on trust, communication style, and personal rapport that took years to develop. Amanda can copy my techniques, but she can't replicate my relationships. I opened my personal phone and showed Jennifer something that made her gasp. What's this? Text messages from 6 of my major clients, all received since Friday night. They're confused about what happened at the dinner and asking if I'm starting my own firm. The messages were exactly what I'd hoped for when I saw my clients' faces during Amanda's announcement. They weren't just confused about my departure. They were interested in continuing to work with me outside of Sterling. Sarah, you could steal back all your clients? I wouldn't be stealing them. I'd be continuing relationships that Amanda systematically infiltrated while pretending to be my mentee. As Jennifer and I finished our coffee, I felt the pieces of my response strategy falling into place. Amanda had spent 3 months learning my methods, studying my relationships, and planning my destruction. But in her arrogance and calculation, she'd made several crucial mistakes. She'd stolen intellectual property that was legally protected. She'd taken credit for accomplishments that were thoroughly documented as mine. And she'd assumed that my client relationships were based solely on techniques she could copy, rather than trust she could never replicate. Jennifer, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to document everything Amanda does over the next 2 weeks. Every client meeting, every strategy she presents, every method she uses that she learned from me. Why? I thought about Amanda's confident smile as she fired me in front of 200 people, her casual dismissal of my 8 years of work, her systematic theft of my professional identity. Because Amanda Chen is about to discover that stealing someone's career has consequences, and those consequences are going to be exactly as public and humiliating as the firing she orchestrated. 2 weeks after my public humiliation, I sat in the office of Patricia Reeves, the intellectual property attorney who had helped me protect my business methods 6 months earlier. The conference table was covered with documentation that would soon destroy Amanda Chen's career just as systematically as she had destroyed mine. Sarah, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of intellectual property theft I've seen in 20 years of practice, Patricia said, reviewing the evidence Jennifer and I had compiled. Amanda hasn't just violated your IP rights. She's created a paper trail that proves deliberate and systematic theft. I felt a cold satisfaction as Patricia walked through the legal case we were building. What kind of damages are we looking at? Substantial. Your proprietary client assessment tools and portfolio management processes were being used to generate millions in revenue for Sterling. Amanda's unauthorized use of your methods constitutes both copyright infringement and trade secret theft. Patricia showed me calculations that made my eyes widen. Based on the client assets under management using your processes, we're looking at potential damages of $8 to $12 million. $12 million? That's the conservative estimate. If we can prove that Amanda's theft of your methods was part of a broader conspiracy to eliminate you and steal your client relationships, the damages could be significantly higher. While Patricia prepared the legal framework for our case, I was building the business foundation for my revenge. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd been quietly meeting with former clients who had reached out after my firing, and their responses had exceeded my most optimistic expectations. 8 of my 10 largest clients had expressed interest in moving their accounts to whatever firm I joined next. More importantly, they were disgusted by the way Sterling had handled my departure and concerned about the continuity of service under Amanda's management. Sarah, we've worked with you for 5 years. Margaret Harrison from Harrison Industries had told me during our confidential meeting. The $12 million portfolio we moved to Sterling was based on our relationship with you personally, not with the company. If you're not there, we don't see a reason to stay. Harrison Industries alone represented nearly 30% of the assets in my former division. If they moved their account, it would cripple Amanda's ability to demonstrate success in her new role. What about the other clients? Patricia asked during our strategy session. 7 more have committed to moving their accounts if I start my own firm. 2 others are waiting to see how the transition with Amanda goes, but they've expressed serious concerns about her ability to replicate the personal service they received from me. So we're looking at potentially 70 to 80% of your former client base? At minimum. And Patricia, these aren't just any clients. They represent the most profitable accounts in Sterling's portfolio management division. I showed Patricia the financial analysis I'd prepared. If these clients move their accounts, Amanda's division will go from being Sterling's most profitable to potentially operating at a loss. That's assuming she can retain the remaining clients without using your proprietary methods. Which brings us to the beautiful irony of her situation, I said, feeling genuinely satisfied for the first time since the end-of-year dinner. Amanda can't effectively manage my former clients without using the methods she stole from me, but using those methods exposes her to massive intellectual property liability. Patricia smiled grimly. She's trapped. Either she stops using your processes and loses clients due to inferior service, or she continues using them and faces criminal charges for IP theft. What about the evidence Jennifer has been gathering? Patricia pulled out the documentation Jennifer had provided about Amanda's activities since my firing. This is devastating. Jennifer has recorded Amanda using your exact assessment protocols, presentation formats, and client communication strategies in at least 15 different instances over the past 2 weeks. Has Amanda modified any of my methods or tried to create her own versions? Not at all. She's using your processes exactly as you taught them to her, which proves she understood they were proprietary methods rather than general industry practices. The evidence of Amanda's continued IP theft was comprehensive and damning. Jennifer had documented phone calls where Amanda used my specific terminology, client meetings where she presented strategies I had developed, and even emails where she'd copied the exact language from my client communications. Patricia, there's something else. Something that makes Amanda's situation even worse. What's that? I pulled out documents I'd received from 2 industry contacts who worked at competing firms. Amanda's been shopping her resume around to other financial services companies, claiming full credit for the methods and client successes that were actually mine. Patricia studied the resume excerpts with growing amazement. She's listing your Harrison Industries deal as her primary accomplishment? The client relationship you developed entirely before she was even hired? Not just Harrison. Amanda's claiming credit for developing what she calls innovative portfolio assessment tools and proprietary client relationship management processes, all of which are my copyrighted methods. So she's not just stealing your IP from Sterling, she's trying to monetize it by marketing herself to other companies as the creator of your work? Exactly. And Patricia, if she gets hired somewhere else based on my accomplishments, she'll likely try to implement my methods at a new company, which would expand the IP theft beyond Sterling. Patricia leaned back in her chair with the expression of an attorney who had just realized the full scope of a winnable case. Sarah, Amanda has created a pattern of intellectual property theft that extends beyond her current employment. This isn't just about unauthorized use, it's about systematic fraud and misrepresentation. What are our legal options? We can file criminal charges for trade secret theft, pursue civil litigation for damages and injunctive relief, and seek a court order preventing Amanda from using your methods anywhere in the financial services industry. How long would that process take? Given the clear evidence and the ongoing nature of the theft, we could have temporary restraining orders in place within days. Amanda would be legally prohibited from using your methods while the case is pending. I felt the pieces of my revenge falling into place with the same methodical precision that Amanda had used to destroy my career. Patricia, what happens to Sterling Financial when Amanda suddenly can't use any of the processes she's been relying on to manage my former clients? Chaos. She's built her entire management strategy around methods she learned from you. Without access to those tools, she'll be completely unprepared to handle the client relationships she inherited. And what happens when clients realize their new manager doesn't actually understand the methods she's been using? Patricia smiled. They start looking for someone who does understand those methods. Someone like the person who created them. As our meeting concluded, Patricia outlined the timeline for our legal assault on Amanda's career. We'll file the IP theft charges on Monday, seek immediate injunctive relief to prevent further use of your methods, and demand damages based on the revenue generated through unauthorized use of your processes. What kind of timeline are we looking at for resolution? With evidence this clear, Amanda will likely seek a settlement rather than risk a trial. But Sarah, there's something else you should consider. What? The publicity from this case could be significant. IP theft in the financial services industry gets attention from trade publications, and Amanda's systematic deception makes this a compelling story for business media. I thought about Amanda's confident smile as she fired me in front of 200 people, her calculated theft of my professional identity, her attempts to claim credit for my accomplishments. Patricia, I want maximum publicity. Amanda destroyed my reputation publicly, and I want her humiliation to be equally public. Are you prepared for Sterling Financial to face scrutiny as well? They enabled Amanda's theft by allowing her to use your methods without proper licensing. Sterling facilitated my public humiliation and allowed Amanda to steal my intellectual property. They deserve whatever consequences come from their poor judgment. As I left Patricia's office that afternoon, I felt the cold satisfaction of someone who had turned the tables on a predator. Amanda had spent 3 months systematically studying and dismantling my career while pretending to be my mentee. Now I was going to systematically dismantle hers, using the very methods she'd stolen from me. The woman who had fired me for being redundant was about to discover that her entire professional identity was built on stolen intellectual property that she was legally prohibited from using. And unlike Amanda's calculated cruelty, my revenge would be delivered through legitimate legal channels that would leave her no room for appeal or sympathy. She had made one crucial mistake in her otherwise flawless execution. She had stolen from someone who understood exactly how to protect and reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a military operation. At exactly 9 a.m., while Amanda Chen was conducting her first major client presentation using my stolen methodologies, federal marshals served Sterling Financial Services with a temporary restraining order prohibiting any further use of my copyrighted assessment tools and portfolio management processes. I wasn't there to see it happen, but Jennifer called me within minutes with a breathless account of the chaos that ensued. "Sarah, you should have seen Amanda's face when the marshals interrupted her presentation to the Wellington Group. She was in the middle of using your proprietary risk assessment matrix when legal papers were served, requiring immediate cessation of all activities involving your intellectual property." I felt a surge of satisfaction imagining Amanda's confusion and panic. What happened to the client meeting? Complete disaster. Amanda had to explain to a room full of potential investors that she couldn't continue her presentation because the methods she was using belonged to someone else. The Wellington Group asked if Sterling was in the habit of using stolen intellectual property for client services. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Amanda's first major presentation as managing director had been destroyed by the revelation that her entire approach was based on theft. "Jennifer, what's happening at the office?" "Chaos. Richard Sterling is furious, but not at Amanda. At the legal department for not catching the IP issues before they hired her. Amanda's locked in her office with company attorneys trying to figure out what methods she can and can't use." While Amanda dealt with the immediate crisis of being legally prohibited from using my processes, I was across town meeting with Harrison Industries to finalize their decision to move their $12 million account to my newly formed independent practice. "Sarah, we've been watching this situation carefully," Margaret Harrison told me in her corporate boardroom. "The legal issues surrounding Sterling's use of your intellectual property have raised serious concerns about their business practices." "What kind of concerns?" "If Sterling allowed their new managing director to use stolen methods for client services, what does that say about their due diligence and ethical standards? We can't have our portfolio managed by a company that operates that way." Harrison Industries' withdrawal was the first domino in what would become a cascade of client defections that destroyed Amanda's division within days. By Tuesday afternoon, 6 more major clients had notified Sterling of their intention to move their accounts. The stated reason in every case was concern about intellectual property irregularities and unauthorized use of proprietary methods in their portfolio management. "Amanda's trying to retain clients by developing new assessment tools to replace yours," Jennifer reported during our daily update call. "But Sarah, she has no idea how to create effective methods from scratch. She only knows how to copy what you taught her. How are her new approaches working?" "They're terrible." Amanda presented a new risk assessment protocol to the Pemberton Group yesterday, and they asked if she was joking. The methodology was so basic that it looked like something a first-year analyst would develop. The beauty of Amanda's situation was that she had become completely dependent on my intellectual property without developing any analytical skills of her own. She could copy my methods perfectly, but she couldn't understand the underlying principles well enough to create effective alternatives. What about Sterling's response to the client defections? Panic. Richard Sterling called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow to address what he's calling the Amanda situation. Apparently, the board is furious that she was allowed to build her entire management strategy around stolen intellectual property. Wednesday brought news that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Patricia Reeves called with an update that made me literally laugh out loud. "Sarah, Amanda's attorneys approached us with a settlement offer." "Already? What are they proposing?" "Complete capitulation. Amanda will acknowledge your ownership of all disputed intellectual property, agree to never use your methods again, pay substantial damages for unauthorized use, and provide a public apology for misrepresenting your work as her own." "What about Sterling Financial?" "They're offering a separate settlement that includes licensing fees for past use of your IP, a public acknowledgement of your ownership of the disputed methods, and, this is my favorite part, an offer to rehire you as managing director at a salary significantly higher than what Amanda was making." I felt the sweet satisfaction of complete victory. They want to fire Amanda and hire me back at a higher salary than they gave her? Exactly. Apparently, losing nearly 60% of their portfolio management assets in 3 days has clarified their priorities. What's Amanda's current status? Suspended pending resolution of the IP theft investigation. She's been barred from client contact and prohibited from accessing any portfolio management systems. until the legal issues are resolved. Thursday brought the final piece of Amanda's destruction when the story broke in Financial Services Weekly, one of the industry's most widely read trade publications. The headline read, "Rising Executive's Career Destroyed by IP Theft Scandal," and the article detailed Amanda's systematic theft of my intellectual property, her calculated deception during our mentoring relationship, and the client exodus that had resulted from the legal revelations. The Chen case highlights the importance of intellectual property protection in financial services, the article concluded. Matthews's methodical documentation of her proprietary processes and proactive legal protection prevented complete theft of her life's work and enabled swift justice when her methods were stolen. Jennifer called me after the article was published with news that Amanda had finally been fired from Sterling. "It was brutal, Sarah." Richard Sterling called Amanda into his office with 2 security guards and a box for her personal items. She was escorted out of the building within 20 minutes. How did she react? According to people who witnessed it, Amanda kept insisting that she'd learned the methods rather than stealing them, and that it wasn't fair to punish her for being a good student. The depth of Amanda's self-deception was remarkable. Even facing the complete destruction of her career, she couldn't acknowledge that systematically copying someone's proprietary methods while planning their elimination constituted theft. What about the other consequences? Amanda's been blacklisted by every major financial services firm in the region. The Financial Services Weekly article made her unemployable in the industry. Friday brought the most satisfying news of all when Patricia called with Amanda's final capitulation. "She's agreed to all our terms, Sarah. Full acknowledgement of IP theft, public apology, substantial damages, and a legally binding agreement never to use your methods again." What about the damages? $2.8 million, representing the revenue generated through unauthorized use of your intellectual property, plus punitive damages for the deliberate nature of the theft. And the public apology? Amanda will publish a statement in Financial Services Weekly acknowledging that she systematically stole your intellectual property, misrepresented your work as her own, and used deceptive practices to eliminate you from Sterling Financial Services. As I prepared for my triumphant return to Sterling as managing director, at a salary 20% higher than Amanda had received, I reflected on the complete reversal of fortunes that had occurred in just 2 weeks. Amanda Chen had spent 3 months systematically studying and stealing my professional life while pretending to be my grateful mentee. She had fired me publicly in the most humiliating way possible, claiming my methods and relationships as her own. But in her arrogance and calculation, she had made one crucial error. She had stolen intellectual property from someone who understood exactly how to protect and reclaim it. The woman who had eliminated my position for being redundant was now facing unemployment, legal liability, and industry blacklisting, while I was returning to Sterling in a position of greater authority than I'd ever held before. "Sarah, there's one more thing," Patricia said as we concluded our call. "Amanda's public apology is scheduled to run in next week's Financial Services Weekly, the same publication that will announce your promotion to managing director. So the industry will learn about Amanda's theft and my vindication in the same issue?" "Exactly. Your professional reputation will be completely restored while Amanda's is permanently destroyed." That evening, I received a call that provided the perfect capstone to my revenge. Richard Sterling himself was on the line, his voice carrying a humility I'd never heard from him before. "Sarah, I want to personally apologize for the way Sterling handled your departure. We should have recognized Amanda's deceptive practices and protected your intellectual property rights. Richard, I appreciate the apology, but what matters now is ensuring this never happens again." "Absolutely. We're implementing new IP protection protocols and conducting thorough background checks on all senior hires. We never want to face another Amanda Chen situation. What about my return to Sterling? We'd be honored to have you back as managing director. Your salary will be $300,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and equity participation. You'll have complete authority over portfolio management operations and a guarantee that your intellectual property rights will be respected and protected." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Amanda's calculated betrayal had ultimately elevated my career to heights I might never have reached otherwise. Her theft had forced me to protect my intellectual property, document my methods, and prove my value in ways that made me indispensable. The next Monday, I walked back into Sterling Financial Services as managing director, greeted by colleagues who had witnessed both my humiliation and my vindication. The respect in their eyes was unmistakable. They had seen what happened to someone who tried to steal from me, and they understood that my success was built on substance rather than deception. Jennifer, who had been instrumental in gathering evidence of Amanda's theft, was promoted to senior assistant with a substantial raise. "I can't believe how perfectly this worked out," she told me as we settled into my new corner office. the same office Amanda had occupied for exactly 2 weeks. It worked out because Amanda made the mistake of stealing from someone who knew how to fight back, I replied, looking out the window at the Portland skyline. She thought she could eliminate me and claim my life's work as her own. Instead, she gave me everything I needed to destroy her career and elevate mine. What do you think Amanda's doing now? I thought about the woman who had smiled so confidently while firing me in front of 200 people, who had systematically stolen my intellectual property while pretending to be grateful for my mentorship. Learning that actions have consequences, I said, and hopefully understanding that stealing someone's life's work isn't just unethical, it's legally and professionally devastating for the person who chooses to do it. As I began rebuilding the portfolio management division that Amanda had nearly destroyed through her theft and incompetence, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal vindication. I had proven that integrity, preparation, and legal protection could triumph over calculation, deception, and theft. Amanda Chen had taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the people who appear most grateful for your mentorship are actually studying you for weaknesses they can exploit. But I had taught her an even more important lesson. Stealing someone's intellectual property and professional identity has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate theft. She had fired me to eliminate what she saw as redundancy. Instead, she had eliminated herself while proving that my knowledge, relationships, and methods were irreplaceable. It was perfect justice, delivered through legitimate legal channels that left her no room for appeal or sympathy. 6 months after my triumphant return to Sterling Financial Services as managing director, I found myself standing at the podium of the same Marriott ballroom where Amanda Chen had destroyed my career. Tonight, however, I was the one being honored at the Pacific Northwest Financial Services Awards ceremony as Executive of the Year. The ballroom was packed with over 300 industry leaders, many of whom had witnessed my public humiliation and subsequent vindication. The contrast between this moment and that devastating night 6 months earlier was not lost on anyone present. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony host announced, this year's Executive of the Year award recognizes an individual who demonstrated exceptional leadership, integrity, and innovation in the face of adversity. Sarah Matthews transformed a devastating professional setback into a masterclass in intellectual property protection and ethical business practices. As I walked to the podium to accept my award, I saw familiar faces in the audience, colleagues from Sterling, clients who had remained loyal throughout the Amanda crisis, and industry peers who had followed the story of my vindication with fascination. Thank you for this incredible honor, I began, holding the crystal award that represented the complete restoration of my professional reputation. 6 months ago, I learned that someone I trusted had systematically stolen my intellectual property and eliminated my position in the most public way possible. Tonight, I want to share what that experience taught me about protection, perseverance, and the power of legal preparation. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word of the story they had read about in trade publications, but were now hearing directly from the source. Amanda Chen taught me that not everyone who seeks mentorship is looking to learn. Some are looking to steal. But she also taught me something more valuable, that protecting your intellectual property isn't just about legal rights. It's about protecting your life's work from people who would claim it as their own. During my speech, I outlined the lessons other executives could learn from my experience, the importance of documenting proprietary methods, the value of proactive IP protection, and the power of systematic evidence gathering when facing professional betrayal. The most important lesson from this experience, I concluded, is that integrity and preparation will always triumph over deception and theft. Amanda spent 3 months learning my methods so she could eliminate me. I spent 8 years developing those methods and 6 months protecting them legally. The outcome was inevitable. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes, with industry leaders who had witnessed both my destruction and vindication showing their respect for how I had handled the crisis. After the ceremony, I was approached by Margaret Harrison from Harrison Industries, whose account had been central to Amanda's downfall. Sarah, I wanted you to know that moving our portfolio to your management was the best business decision we made this year. Your leadership through this crisis proved exactly why we trusted you with our investments. Thank you, Margaret. Your loyalty during the transition meant everything to me. It wasn't loyalty, it was good business sense. Amanda may have copied your methods, but she never understood the relationships and trust that made those methods effective. As the evening wound down, I reflected on the comprehensive nature of my victory over Amanda's betrayal. The statistics were remarkable. Sterling's portfolio management division had grown by 40% under my leadership, surpassing all previous performance records. 8 of the 9 clients who had initially fled during the Amanda crisis had returned, bringing additional referrals with them. My intellectual property had been licensed to 3 other firms, generating substantial royalty income. Amanda's name had become synonymous with professional theft in industry circles. But the most satisfying aspect of my vindication wasn't financial. It was the complete reversal of professional reputation that had occurred. Amanda had gone from rising star to industry pariah, while I had gone from fired employee to executive of the year. "Sarah, there's someone here who wants to meet you," Jennifer said, approaching me with a woman I didn't recognize. The woman extended her hand with a nervous smile. "Ms. Matthews, I'm Lisa Rodriguez. I'm a senior analyst at Morrison Financial, and I wanted to thank you for what you did." "Thank you for what?" "For exposing Amanda Chen's practices. She interviewed for a position at our company 3 months ago, claiming credit for all your methodologies and client successes. When we discovered the Financial Services Weekly articles about her IP theft, we realized we'd almost hired someone who built her entire career on stolen work." I felt a surge of satisfaction knowing that Amanda's betrayal continued to have consequences for her job prospects. "I'm glad the information was helpful. You probably prevented her from stealing intellectual property from other professionals at our firm. The industry is much safer because you had the courage to fight back." A week later, I received news that provided the perfect capstone to Amanda's complete professional destruction. Patricia Reeves called with an update that made me smile with genuine satisfaction. "Sarah, Amanda's been arrested for wire fraud related to her job applications at other firms." "What do you mean?" "The FBI investigated her claims about developing your intellectual property and discovered that she'd been systematically misrepresenting stolen work as her own creation when applying for positions at multiple companies. That constitutes wire fraud under federal law." "How serious are the charges?" "She's facing up to 10 years in federal prison and substantial fines." Amanda didn't just steal your IP, she used it to commit fraud against potential employers across multiple states. The criminal charges were the final consequence of Amanda's calculated betrayal. She had gone from Harvard MBA rising star to federal criminal defendant, all because she had chosen to steal from someone who understood how to protect and reclaim their intellectual property. What about her current situation? Unemployed, facing criminal prosecution, and completely blacklisted in the financial services industry. Amanda's learned that stealing someone's life's work has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate theft. 1 year after the anniversary dinner that had changed everything, I found myself in an unexpected situation. Amanda's former attorney reached out to ask if I would consider writing a character reference letter for her sentencing hearing. "Ms. Matthews, I know this is an unusual request given your history with Amanda, but she's facing significant prison time, and any demonstration of professional forgiveness might help with her sentencing." I considered the request carefully. Amanda had systematically stolen my intellectual property, eliminated my position in the most humiliating way possible, and attempted to build her career on my life's work while claiming it as her own. "I appreciate you reaching out," I told her attorney, "but I don't think Amanda has demonstrated the kind of genuine remorse that would warrant my support. She spent 3 months lying to me while planning my destruction, then continued lying about her crimes even after being caught. She understands that she made mistakes. She didn't make mistakes. She made calculated choices to commit intellectual property theft and fraud. Those choices had consequences, and now she needs to face them." Amanda was eventually sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud, a sentence that reflected both the systematic nature of her crimes and her complete lack of remorse throughout the legal proceedings. 2 years after my vindication, Sterling Financial Services asked me to develop a comprehensive intellectual property protection program for the entire company, ensuring that no other employee would face the theft I had experienced. "Sarah, we want you to create industry-leading standards for IP protection," Richard Sterling told me during our planning meeting. "Your experience with Amanda has taught us that intellectual property theft can destroy both individual careers and company reputations." "I'd be honored to develop those protections," I replied. "But I want to ensure that the program includes education about recognizing and preventing the kind of systematic deception Amanda employed." Lafay. The IP protection program I developed became a model for other financial services firms, helping protect countless professionals from the kind of theft I had experienced. Amanda's betrayal had ultimately led to industry-wide improvements in intellectual property security. 3 years after the anniversary dinner that had destroyed my career and elevated it to new heights, I received an unexpected letter from Amanda in federal prison. The letter was filled with self-pity and continued attempts to minimize her crimes, but one paragraph stood out. "I hope you understand that I never meant to hurt you personally. I was just trying to advance my career, and I thought you would understand that business sometimes requires difficult decisions." I showed the letter to Patricia Reeves, who read it with the same expression of disgust I felt. Even after 3 years in prison, she still doesn't understand that systematically stealing someone's life's work isn't a difficult business decision. It's criminal fraud, Patricia observed. Some people are incapable of accepting responsibility for their choices, I replied. Amanda destroyed her own career through theft and deception, but she'll probably spend the rest of her life blaming other people for the consequences of her actions. As I look back on the experience that transformed my career from near destruction to industry leadership, I'm struck by the comprehensive nature of the justice that was served. Amanda Chen made a calculated decision to steal my intellectual property and eliminate my position in the most humiliating way possible. In response, I used legitimate legal channels to expose her theft, reclaim my intellectual property, and restore my professional reputation while ensuring she faced appropriate consequences for her crimes. The woman who fired me for being redundant learned that stealing someone's life's work makes you redundant in the worst possible way, legally, professionally, and personally. She had eliminated my position to advance her own career. Instead, she eliminated her own career while proving that my knowledge, relationships, and methods were irreplaceable. It was perfect justice, served through integrity, preparation, and the power of legal protection rather than revenge or vindictiveness. Amanda Chen had taught me that trust can be betrayed, but she had also taught me something more valuable, that protecting your intellectual property isn't just about legal rights. It's about ensuring that your life's work remains your own, no matter who tries to steal it.